What's up, everybody? How's it going? Thank you for tuning into the show. I'm your host, MJ. You're now tuned into Horror Lane. So, as you guys can tell, as promised, we're going to be going in. I'm going to be talking about with you guys and sharing my opinions and my thoughts of one I believe, if not one of the most iconic horror films in history. I think that this film it does go over. It does go underrated to a certain extent. This film is actually better than a lot of films what we've known of and what we hear of that's the most popular. If I had to, before we get to going, I would say that this film, The Gate, sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but the 1987 film, The Gate, I would put this, it would definitely be in my top 10 list of greatest horror films of all time. Yet alone, it would be my actual number one, not number one, but it would be in my top three. So once again, we're going to be talking about the Gate movie, the 1987 film Gate, starring young Stephen Dorff. Okay. For those of you guys, a lot of you guys may not know about Stephen Dorff's early career. I wanted to just let you guys know that if it had not been for the Gate, we probably would not have seen what we have seen and what we know of Stephen Dorff. It all originates from this 1987 film, The Gate. Okay, so now we know The Gate. The film follows two young boys who basically accidentally release a horde of demons in this big hole in the backyard of one of the basically the protagonists. And so this is the complete backstory of the tale. So basically, what we have is that the parents, we have two siblings, which are stepbrother and stepsister. And their parents leave and go on a trip or business trip or a vacation for 3 days. I believe it was a business trip for 3 days. And then we have the two siblings, which and also we have their one of the siblings' best friends. So they all are basically at the house or basically home for the weekend without their parents. So what happens is the oldest sibling, the old sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but the oldest sibling, Al, okay, Al decides, okay, when her parents are off from the vacation, she decides to basically throw this party for all of her friends, and it becomes this big party. And this is how the story, the storyline and structure, it starts up and it starts getting real juicy. This film, it does start getting real good early on. Give me 1 second, you guys. Let me make sure the comments are on. Okay. Sorry about that, you guys. Okay, comments are on. But anyways, this is how the story starts, basically, with two siblings, and one of the siblings, the oldest sibling, Al, she decides to throw a party while the parents are away, and it's a normally common party for any normal teenager that's want to throw a party for friends or at school and everything, and they throw the little house party while the friends are away. So it's a common normal thing that what we see now. As we said, as I spoke of, young Stephen Dorff he's the main protagonist in this film. Okay, so there you will say that there are three protagonists in this film. You have young Stephen Dorff. You also have young Stephen Dorff playing Glenn. You also have Christa Denton playing Al, the oldest sister, the oldest sibling, and then you also have Lewis Tripp. Now, I want to say as far as these three characters, before I go any more, these three characters. So we're talking about Stephen Dorff, we're talking about Christa Denton, and we're talking about Lewis Tripp. These three, I think that this film was casted very, very well. This film was casted very well. Um, I can think of no wrongs with this film. I could think of no wrongs. I think the film overall, the way it was structured and seeing how it was an American film, it's an independent film, an indie film. I think it was good. Um, Now we know, like, of course, we know we have franchises like the Halloween, the Friday the 13th, the Nightmare on Elm Street, Child's Play, etc., so on, so on, so on. I will say, of course, we know that. Uh, hey, how's it going? Videos by Voices. Thanks for tuning in, Loran. Um, what we do know is that from the three main casts, I think that this film was casted very well. Where we have Lewis Tripp and we had young Stephen Dorff, and we also had Christa Denton. It was casted very well. I think the overall progression of the actors correlating with each other, I think it was on point. Now we know we have the common thing where we have one sibling which is older than the other sibling, where they have an age difference and an age gap. And then we see that there's a little struggle between a conflict between the two siblings. So now we know that the siblings do both of their parents they don't have the same full parents. So it's step brother, step sister. But you see the conflict there between the older sister and then the younger brother. And when the parents go away for a weekend and leaves Al in charge for the weekend, we already know it's spec from the beginning. Well, we know there's something crazy that's going to go on, and it's probably going to be some little twists and turns. But before we know, we got the little the little before we started getting into the scenes where the parents were leaving and then the party was going to take place. I like the way the film started off. It gave us kind of like a teaser of the hole in the backyard. That was very unique with that. As I said, but Stephen Dorff, hell of an actor. I think arguably, I don't know about you guys, but I think personally that to me, this is still always to me the most best film that I like by Stephen Dorff. This is one of his most phenomenal performances he's done in most his one of his biggest projects. And I think this is actually when we talk about Stephen Dorff, it would surprise me if most people, when you ask about Stephen Dorff and you say what will be one of his best or his top works or performances he's done, I would have to say Gate would be my number one. I was sold on it, and that's the thing we have to understand, that some actors or actresses, their best films come from when they are child, not adults. Now we know that he's been young Stephen Dorff. He's been in some other films. For example, he's been in the Blade series with Wesley Snipes. He's also been in Felon. He's also been in what was it? I think the 2017 film Leatherface. Also Immortals, and also the horror movie Alone in the Dark. So he's been in some projects, but I still think that The Gate was like that major film or work of his whole career. What if I were to see run into, I don't know about you guys, but if I were to run into Stephen Dorff, he's not young anymore. But if I were to run into Stephen Dorff, just miraculously, I'd have been like, young Stephen Dorff. But I know out of respect, I know he would understand where I'm coming from. He wouldn't take that as disrespect by calling him young because he's a grown man now. But young Stephen Dorff, he would know what I mean. But as I said, I think to me this was just his overall greatest performance to me. I still love his work in this film. I think it was a good job, especially as him being a childhood star. Now, also, we talked about his best friend. We talk about Louis Tripp. I think Louis Tripp also, he did a phenomenal job as well. He was a good co-star to the film as playing as Glenn's best friend. I also think the elder sister, Christa Denton, playing Al, I think she did a hell of a job too. Now, what I did notice about the film is that with all three of these characters, when we talk about all three of these characters, Louis Tripp, Stephen Dorff, and Christa Denton, it seems to me as if I think we can agree that Stephen Dorff had after the Gate film, Stephen Dorff had the most successful career. Like his career kept going on, processing, and you kept seeing him in a lot of films throughout the 90s and also into the early 2000s. And even in the mid 2000s, we've seen Stephen Dorff's career just keep increasing. And that's what I like to see about that, as far as, because we know a lot of times when we see child stars, it's hard for sometimes it's very hard for a child star to kind of progress into when they get into their older ages, into the teenage years, and then when they become a young adult and an adult, it's hard for them to kind of transition out of that childhood star into an adult star. So I do think that Stephen Dorff was able to do that, but I don't think it was the same for Louis Tripp. I really wonder, like, what happened to Louis Tripp, because he was in a few projects, but it wasn't nothing majorly known. I think the only major film that I think Louis Tripp was known for after The Gate, that's an actual known film, what I mean, because he was in other projects, but they wasn't something that's known. I would have to say, I think it would be the movie with Jean-Claude Van Damme, Bloodsport. That was the only film that I could say that Louis Tripp actually was in, and it was we knew of that film, but other than that, we really didn't see nothing of Louis Tripp, which was surprising to me, because I do think that Louis Tripp was actually a very good actor as well, being a childhood star, and I was just surprised that he didn't have more of an increase of his career and his works. The same thing for Christa Denton. What I was surprised is that, because we know, for those of you guys that do know, when you were a certain age and when you grew up, and then we got to saw the Gate movie, and we knew of Christa Denton. Now we know we have certain, whether they're teenagers or mid or preteens or teenagers, there's certain sweethearts. So I would say that Christa Denton was a sweetheart. She was like America's favorite. Everyone just thought that she was just one of the idol females, teenagers to be with. Like, she was basically America's sweetheart. The thing is that what I noticed about what Christa Denton is that she didn't keep increasing in projects after the Gate. She was in work. She had performances, but it wasn't fully at effect. Hold on, you guys. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna put the link up just in case anyone that does jump in eventually want to jump in and join the live stream. Give me 1 second. Okay, the stream is up. Okay. But anyways, yeah, moving on. Like I said, I was very surprised that Christa didn't we didn't get to see a more of her as she began to mature more and she began to get out of her teenage years into her adult years. I thought that was very surprising, because like I said, she was America's sweetheart. And I think that she was definitely like a very decent actress, a very decent actress. Being a teenage actress, I think she did a hell of a job. Now, I will say that I'm not sure. Maybe it's just that she wanted to take a break from. Maybe she wanted to take a break from Hollywood. I'm not sure, or whatever, etc. Because even before the Gate, she did appear in a lot of films. Christa Denton. She had a good, successful career throughout the '80s, so she was in a lot of films, which I think maybe possibly that's why she decided to take a break from Hollywood or something. But what I noticed, like I said, I thought it was funny that we just didn't see any more of her, and that was kind of strange and odd because I think that she could have become a horror icon, like how when we think of Jamie Lee Curtis, when we think of Neve Campbell, when we think of people like Sarah Michelle Gellar, like Jamie Lee Curtis, and etc. Vera Farmiga, etc. So on and so on and so on. I do think that Christa Denton, she was a phenomenal actress. So I was surprised that we didn't get to see her become a global horror icon because she was a hell of an actress. And as I said, I think maybe I don't know, maybe it's because like they drained her out in the '80s because she was in a lot of her works were in the '80s. For instance, like you had she was in a 1985 film, Not My Kid. She was in The Bad Seed, also that Bad Seed which appeared in 1985 as well. The Burning Bed, uh, Scanned in Town. She also was in 8 Million Ways to Die. So she was actually in a lot of pretty much different horror films, thriller, slasher, suspense films throughout the '80s. So I think she did have a very good wide worldwide exposure career in the '80s. But what I wanted to see was I wanted to see her progression in the '90s. That's what I wanted to see. I think she would have did a very phenomenal job. So I'm very curious. I'm not sure what went wrong right there or what possibly. Oh, 1 second, guys. Gotta real quick. Yeah, sorry about that, you guys. But yeah, I think she was a phenomenal actress, and I think that she just could have did I would have liked to see her in the '90s. I really would have liked to see her in the '90s because I think, as I said, she would have been a good horror icon in the '90s, and I think she could have easily been in any one of those franchises that we had. For example, you guys know like another actress. What's her name? I love her as a childhood star. What is her name? She has a common name, you guys. It's at the tip of my tongue. She got picked off in the beginning of Scream. What was her name? Um, what was her name? I can't think of it right now, but Drew Barrymore. Yes, Drew Barrymore. Drew Barrymore had a very successful career. Drew Barrymore, she had a very successful career as a childhood star, and then as we got to see her as an adult, we saw a transgression between her as a child star compared to an adult star. Now, as we know, as a child star, she was in a lot of different horror films and suspense mystery films. But as a adult star, she transgression out of the horror genre. She started going into different other projects such as action and comedy films. That what I thought was curious too. I would have liked to see Drew Barrymore in a lot more horror films when she became out of her childhood ages. But in her childhood ages, and when we got to see a lot of her work as far as in different type of mystery, suspense, and horror films. For example, one of my best, hands down, of Drew Barrymore, hands down, my best film of her is because I know she gets a lot of talk about when we talk about the Scream franchise, but I'm like, she was only like in the first scene of the Scream franchise. But her most phenomenal work that I like the best as far as being in a horror genre was when she played in, it's called Firestarter. For those of you guys that don't know, it's called Firestarter. Drew Barrymore was a little kid. That movie was so phenomenal. Matter of fact, that's one of my, I have that on my way. I have it on the way, and it should be coming soon. Firestarter was a phenomenal film by young Drew Barrymore. Also in Ray Bradbury Theater, she was in the Screaming Woman. She did a phenomenal job in that. So that's exactly what I'm saying when we have about childhood stars versus when they transgression to adult stars. A lot of times when we see childhood stars in horror suspensions, we don't see them all the time necessarily transgress into that in an adult age. They may switch up. Let's see, let me go to the comments real quick. Visited by Voices. Canadian production in the 80s didn't make for the easiest way to transition into a Hollywood career. Hollywood is a town full of gatekeepers and resist actors from other regions with exceptions. That is true, Loran, from Visited by Voices. That is actually true, and that's actually correct, you guys. It is true. And see, that was the problem I noticed with between the American films and we talk about independent films and also like Canadian films. I do have a live stream that's coming up, maybe I think in 2 weeks, I believe scheduled for the 15th. I'm going to be going into Canadian films. That is true. Like when we have Canadian films compared to American films, there we can have those gatekeepers as far as we're talking about actresses and actors. That could be a problem right there. So I actually do agree with Loran on Visited by Voices. That's a very good point that he made right there. Give another shout out to Jen Tatum. She's hey Jen, thanks for tuning in. You're one of my major fans and supporters. So thanks for tuning into the show. Yeah, as we said, like, so going back and piggybacking onto Christa Denton, like I said, it just surprised me, and I was just shocked, and I was amazed that she wasn't, she didn't have a transgression into the 90s. I really would have loved her to see her in there, but as we say, when we talk about these gatekeepers in Hollywood and etc. and so on and so on, that's where things come into play. And I think it's very sad, and it pisses me off. Excuse my language for all you guys that don't like the language, but it pisses me off because I'm like, some of these actresses and actors, they are very, I would say A-list. I could call them A-list actors, and I'm like, okay, and actresses, but I'm like, where are they, or what happened to them? I'm pretty sure all of you guys have had an actor or actress you've known or you like, and you be like, what happened to them? They were phenomenal. They were good. I would like to see them more, but I think this is what happened. As I said, Christa Denton, she was in a lot of films in the 80s. I mean, she was in a lot of projects. And as I said, it's either she decided to take a break because she was doing a lot of work. She was in a lot of projects throughout the 80s, or it's about that thing as far as transgression into the Hollywood when we're talking about American versus Canadian films. So that could be the issue right there. Because like I said, I think she was America's sweetheart, even though technically, but you guys get what I'm saying. We talk about those females, those teenagers, okay, they're America's sweetheart. You know what I'm saying? She was just so adorable. A lot of people love Christa Denton. But those were just some key things I wanted to point out to you guys about. I want to talk a little bit about Christa Denton, in which I really like to see her more. As I said, Louis Tripp, I didn't see him in a lot of films after The Gate, but like I said, the only thing we knew of was the Bloodsport. That was a known film. Other than that, and another thing, I was surprised that. Have you guys noticed that Louis Tripp is the only one out of all three of these cast members? He's the only one as an adult that does not look nothing. He looks completely different than when he was a child. We know we see that kind of curly blonde hair. We see the kind of curly hair and everything with it. It's just he doesn't look nothing like when he was a child. Now with Stephen Dorff and Christa Denton, they still have that physical trip. You can still tell, okay, I still can see that's Stephen Dorff and that's Christa Denton as adults. But it just surprised me and everything that that was something that I just thought was like weird. Like Louis Tripp doesn't look nothing like he did when he was a child. I guess some people, when they from a kid to when they become an adult, they can change overall, like their whole appearance. They look totally different. But that's a little bit of what I wanted to go into you guys about as far as about the three main cast members. Now, as I said, as far now as the movie itself, I think that the movie, it was good. It was definitely good. I think that to a certain extent, it didn't get enough credit, which I think it should have gotten, because this film, to me, one of the main reasons I liked it, because it wasn't a facsimile or it wasn't a copycat of a lot of the horror films that were already out during that time. We had a lot of the different zombie movies. different type of just a different type of supernatural horror films. Every type of horror film that we saw, they all a lot of them they all kind of had this certain to a certain extent the same kind of antagonist or the same kind of storyline to a certain extent. But with the Gate, I like how it was a whole completely different twist as far as the story structure. Okay, so we talking about this gate being unlocked, this hole in the background, this releasing this whole demonic these demons and these baby demons, and then the major big huge among us, the king of the demons being released from beneath under the ground and stuff. I thought that was so amazing. So it wasn't a common thing what we saw. Like usually when we see a horror film, we'll see a good for a slasher. We'll know we have some type of killer or antagonist where they were slasher, or we've seen the zombie films. With the Gate, I think it did stand alone. It's because it had its own type of structure as far as the type of antagonist what we got. Now, we know we did see in there, we did see a lot of like as far as the music, the heavy metal. We had the hard rock. I like that mixture of it. And actually, when they showed the connection between young Louis Tripp when he had those records and he was playing it, and then what a coincidence that the records he was playing, that it was the same thing. It had behind it, when you played it in reverse, it had the demonic seances and everything, how that was summoning the damn demons and stuff. That was this basically porthole in this gate to the just complete biggest abyss that we saw. I think that was just, I like that. It was amazing. I do actually like the theme music as well. Give me a second, guys. Let me throw a couple of more comments. You guys see a couple more comments. Loran says saw both Gate films at a 2-screen local cinema when they were released. The first film was a sold out show, and the crowd were definitely excited and loud. Yep, that's true. That's true. Definitely. Part 2. The theater was empty, so maybe America only had enough appetite for one of these movies. I can agree with that. I can see where you're coming with that, Loran. Yes, that's true. I can see where you're coming with that. I think that's what the thing we're talking about. What the American fan base as far as like what Hollywood and what these gatekeepers, what they're used to, and what they think in their eyes, and what they think is a good actual horror saga or horror franchise compared to when you have horror franchises come outside of America. I do think that they're kind of biased with it a little bit. So that is true. It was mighty funny and strange to me how the Gate Part 1, it was a big, humongous. It was, like you said, it was sold out. It did a phenomenal job. But when Gate 2 came out, it wasn't the same. The ratings, the overall ratings, the overall audience of it, we wasn't really thrilled to see it. So that could have played a huge part right there. So we know right there, we just don't even know what happened. I still question it to this day. What happened to the Gate 2? Like, how did that happen like that? Because the first film was just phenomenal job, and I just don't know what happened with that second film. 1 second, you guys. Yeah, I just don't know what happened to that film. It was just like weird, but we know that we do see that sometimes when we have films. Sometimes we see a film, and then there may be a follow up film to it, but then the film doesn't do as the first film. The film doesn't do overall as well as the first film did when it released. That could be the problem. We have these gatekeepers in Hollywood and et cetera, and especially in particular if the film is not, especially a horror film or any type of film whatsoever. If it's outside of the United States, if it's not an American film, that can be the problem too with these gatekeepers and everything. As I said, the film overall, it was good. I don't think that at one bit of the film it was boring. What I like most about the film is it kept you engaged. It kept the audience and the watcher and the viewer engaged throughout the whole film, from the beginning to the middle to the end. It was a constant progression. That's what I liked about it. Just boom, 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 boom. That synchronization. The beginning, like I said, was overall. I like the way they gave us the teaser of what we were going to see and what was the expectation with this big old hole that was in the background, because the hole wasn't big at first, but it kept progressing. Now the party scene where Al threw the party, this is what basically it engaged everything, and we saw the big we saw the film start transgression, and we kind of knew what it was going to be about. So when we seen the party as a common teenage party thrown when the parents are away. We saw the whole party, people drinking and everything, but then, like I said, we had a confliction between siblings, the older sibling and the younger sibling. But when I saw when they start doing the light as a feather, stiff as a board, that seance and everything, That right there, I think that was the first thing that contribute to the stirring up and the demonic spirits and the satanic and releasing this gatehole. That was the first thing. It was the seance. So for those of you guys that have watched this film and you do remember it fully, it was two key things. You guys need to know that seance where they did in the beginning, light as a feather, stiff as a board in the party. That was the first thing that stirred it up. But then also we had when young Stephen Dorff and Lewis Tripp, when they were reading the little thing from the description. It was like a seance. He read it, but see, they didn't know. Glenn didn't know what he was reading. He didn't know that he was going to be reading something that was going to be stirring up so this big old chaos and everything. But those were the two key things. The seance at the beginning, the light as a feather, stiff as a board, and then when the two young actors, Stephen Dorff and Lewis Tripp, when they were reading, they read I believe it was Glenn, if I'm not mistaken. Glenn was the one that actually read the little scripture from I believe it was from a little game board they had or something, a little game or something, and he read the little seance. When he was reading, he didn't know what it was, but once you saw him read that little seance, all of a sudden, that's when we knew if something was going on, because then it switched the scenes and it took us back to over there to where the hole was in the backyard, and we seen the little smoke, or we heard the little noise and stuff. So that's when we knew this was really about to start getting juicy, and things were about to start getting spicy. But as I said, yeah, it was a phenomenal job. I like as far as how they kept the viewers and the watchers engaged in the film. As far as the antagonist, before we go into the antagonist, I want to talk about the film quality. Now, this is another thing between we're talking about American films and like Canadian films or independent films, indie films. Basically the production and the video quality and et cetera, the theatrical quality and all these things. I will say, we know that when we saw The Gate 1, you could tell it didn't have the best quality. As far as you could tell, it didn't use the overall best quality. Like, it didn't have the most top dynamic quality as far as video production and as far as theatrical scenes and stage props and all that things. We know it didn't have that because first thing we got to understand is that it was a different time frame compared to now. All the different technology and equipment they have now compared to back then, you got to understand it was different. So when we look at the quality overall, the texture, we look at the quality of the Gate film, you could see there were time frames where it was like, okay, wow. You could tell, oh, it could have been a better quality of film, or what different scenes, how it was staged, or like you could see certain things where we think of that name like bootleg, something that's bootleg, or you could tell that they didn't have the best quality of equipment and everything. But as I said, even though there were scenes that you could see that they didn't have the best quality of equipment and just best production, overall production, such as maybe Hollywood had in American films, it still was a good job, though. It was a good job overall. There were actually some scenes in the film that I actually think were just as good or even better than some of the American films. As far as like, okay, you remember the scene where you could see the movement through the wall? There were some scenes that I just could not forget. One second, you guys. Let me check the comments. Okay, but yeah, there were particular scenes that I liked really good. As for example, one of the scenes I thought was really good, I thought was very constructed. I liked the way they captured the scene. Was the scene where we saw the wall moving, when you could see like it was some type of demonic force. You could see almost like if some type of things or was crawling in through the walls and stuff. You could see the walls moving, like pushing in and out. When you seen that whole truck along the stairwells, especially when you seen Glenn walking up and down the stairwells. I think that scene was even though it didn't have the best quality of production overall, such as Hollywood American films, I did like some certain parts of this movie where I think it was a phenomenal job. That scene right there where the wall was, you could see like it was like something was trying to push out of the wall, or just it was moving and everything. That was so phenomenal. We see that in some films nowadays. We saw it in The Conjuring. We see it a lot in the demonic possession films, where we see those type of things like that. Even The Grudge, The Ring, a lot of these films, we see that where that same scene that The Gate gave us. I like that scene right there. That was a good ass scene to me personally. I like the way it was crafted. There was a couple of other decent scenes that I think that were actually staged perfectly, even though they did not have the best quality of equipment and production. It's still, I think that there were a lot of scenes in here that were actually on point. Even so far as like, remember the main scene when we got introduced to the main antagonist, where the big demon came from the from beneath the living room, from the floor, and it came start coming up like slowly but surely. You know, it didn't have the best quality when we start seeing that demon. You could tell it wasn't the best quality of production, but it still was a phenomenal job. And what I think made it so good is like, I had never seen nothing like that, such as the way the Gate film, the way it was crafted in this film. I had never seen nothing like that before. As far as watching all different type of horror films, suspense, thriller, mystery films, I'd never seen nothing what we saw in the Gate film. That's why I think the Gate film was so legendary. It was a banger because I got to see something that I never got to see before in a horror film. To me, it was like the Gate. It separated itself from all the other horror films that what I had saw. Most of the times when I see horror films, it would either be a slasher or it'd be a zombie type of apocalypse film. Or of course we see like the environmental horror films, such as like the monsters or creatures, or animals, such things like that. But the Gate, I think it did a good job when we're talking about this satanic stuff, because when we normally see demonic films, we will see like someone being possessed. I can count so many, I can lose count of so many times how many films we've had where it was about some demonic possession or something like that. I think that this it fell into that genre of demonic possession, the supernatural, but of like that demon type of stuff. But it wasn't what we was used to seeing, oh, someone being possessed. And then you have to have someone kind of try to perform some type of ritual or some type of to break that possession. This was different. It was not no possession in this film. It was more of the forces of demons, the forces from hell, from the deepest holy abyss, was coming to wreak havoc. Okay. And we knew what we saw as we start seeing the characters start investigating. And when young Louis Tripp was investigating, he started realizing that they were already performing certain rituals and certain seances, and to basically stir up the demons and stir up the gate hole and release the gate hole. Okay, so they allowed these demons to actually start conjuring up. And I think that was just a phenomenal job. As I said, the antagonist in the film with the Gate film, I like the antagonist. I can't say it enough. I loved it so much. The whole demon thing was so phenomenal. It's just this, when you have these even the way they look, because we could tell before we got the big, huge, the king of the demons, whether it was a female or a male, it was the king of the demons that came from the living room floor and all the way up to the second floor. That was the main antagonist. But the sub supporting antagonist was all the little baby demons. Man, even like I said, it wasn't the best quality of film, but I still like the scenes where they gave us where all the little baby demons was chasing them and everything, especially when we had young. Y'all remember the scene where young Louis Tripp, was it Louis Tripp? Yeah, he went outside. I think it was him or it was Al. One of them had went outside to walk on the front porch to check the surroundings and everything. And remember when they was looking, and then young Stephen Dorff, they was yelling like, "Come in, come in, come in, come in!" But he couldn't see that I think it was young Louis Tripp. He couldn't see all the little baby demons was right there, right by his feet and everything. And then when they said run, when he finally started moving back towards, he realized that it was a gang of baby demons. He started running. You could see all those baby demons just chasing and everything. And when they closed the door, the scene where one of the baby demons' little hand got caught in the door, I just thought that it was a good job. I just like it real good. Also, I do like the part where Louis Tripp, he fell down into the gate hole, into the holy abyss. That was so phenomenal. So, I mean, it's just so many things about this film that I can name that I think that was on point, and it just did a phenomenal job. And I think that, as I said, if you ask, most commonly, if you do a survey and you ask people, give me a list, a top 10 list of your greatest horror films of all time, I can probably guarantee you that most people would not put Gate in there, yet alone in the top 10, or they wouldn't probably put it in the top 5 or top 3. Now, like I said, I think it's because when we have a lot of films, we have so many horror films, because like I said, you'd be surprised, but the horror community, the horror genre has a big following. I think, to me personally, I think that the horror franchise in the horror genre, I think it has one of the biggest audience expanses compared to any other genre. I personally believe that. But I think what you have so many horror films, especially so many American horror films, American slashers, thriller, suspense, I think that what it is certain films that you have a lot of films that are so popular. They have a lot of a huge prestige to it, and it has so much popularity to it. So I think this is why most people wouldn't put Gate in it. But I can guarantee you, if most people would go back and watch the Gate movie from beginning to end, you be like, okay, man, this was a phenomenal film. How did I miss out on this film? How is this not in my top 10 film? Yet alone, how is it not in my top 5? Okay. But personally, to me, I have a top 10 list. But me, I would put the Gate in my top 5 list. Actually, in the top 10, it would fall in my top 5 ranking. As I said, overall, I liked it for what it was. I know it wasn't the best of quality, but I still liked it overall for what it was. I was impressed by all 3 cast members. I was surprised that all 3 cast members did not have a overall successful career and continuous career and an increase in their career and their works after the Gate, seeing how they all were phenomenal actors and actresses. But overall, it's obviously clear that Stephen Dorff had the best career after the Gate film. What is a couple things? Oh, before I go any little more with you guys, I want to share a few things with you guys. I did a couple of my packages that I did purchase. They did arrive, so I want to share something with you guys. Just a few things, nothing major. As I continue to do uploads, I will be sharing some of you guys my collection. So I decided to add some more horror films or some more films to my collection, my DVDs collection. One in particular, I want to share the first one with you guys. A lot of you guys should know this. This is a common film. Pretty sure you guys should know it. If you don't know it, I recommend that you watch it. But this is the film starring Kevin Bacon. Stir, make sure you guys can see that. Stir of Echoes. Stir of Echoes. Okay. Stir of Echoes. This is a phenomenal film to me personally, ladies and gentlemen. This is a phenomenal film. This was a film that I was very, very, very impressed by. It was just overall, I was very impressed by this film. It's brand new, still in the packaging and everything. I had to get this. This is one of the films that I really liked a lot by Kevin Bacon, and I had to get it because I never had it on DVD, so I have it on DVD now. As I told you guys may not know, I told you guys that personally, I would have liked to see Kevin Bacon in more films, in horror films in the 80s. In the 80s, I would like to have seen him in films. Now, we did get to see him, of course, like I said, in the 90s, in the late 90s, and the early 2000s, we got to see Kevin Bacon in some horror films. But I would have liked to see him in some actually films as like the main character or something in the 80s. For example, we saw him in the first Friday the 13th, but it was a supporting cast member, and he got picked off. So what I mean is, it would have been nice to maybe possibly see Kevin Bacon in one of the the Nightmare on Elm Street films. I think he would have did a phenomenal job. So I was surprised by that. But this is a film, Stir of Echoes, starring Kevin Bacon. It's a phenomenal film. This is a supernatural horror film. Phenomenal film. As I said, I love Kevin Bacon overall as his career performance, but I do think he is a phenomenal. I do think he's a good actor when it comes to horror films as well. And I would have liked to seen him in more horror films in the 80s. Not just in we had a supporting cast member and he got picked off in the Friday the 13th. It would have been nice to see him in something else, such as a Nightmare on Elm Street, any one of them, maybe more than one of the Nightmare on Elm Street films, even maybe possibly one of the Halloween. I would have liked to see him in one of the Halloween films. But during that time, like I said, Kevin Bacon, he was in a lot of different other films outside of the horror genre. Like I said, one of the films I really love of him is Footloose. That was a phenomenal film he did. I love that film. Some other films, like you said, Murder in the First Degree. There was a lot of films Kevin Bacon was in pretty much. What was it? Not Wild Things, but River Wild, I believe it was. With the whitewater rafting, where he was one of the antagonists in the film. I like that. Like Kevin Bacon overall, to me personally, like I said, he's a very good actor. But I would have liked and enjoyed to see him in more films. Yes. Loran says, love Stir of Echoes. Great adaptation of a great Richard Madison's novel. Unfortunately, it was released at the same time as The Sixth Sense, so it got buried. Yes, that is true. That is true. Loran from Visited by Voices makes a very good point. At that time when Stir of Echoes came out, let me show you guys again, just in case you're like, Stir of Echoes. At the point in time when Stir of Echoes came out, we had other films such as The Sixth Sense that came out at the same time. And then we know, of course, we had Bruce Willis. Bruce Willis is a majorly top-notch A-list actor. So we know Bruce Willis, he already had a phenomenal career. So it's at the same time. So Loran makes a good point about that. When you have Stir Echoes coming out starring Kevin Bacon at the same time, when you have The Sixth Sense that came out with Bruce Willis in it, you know that it would have kind of a little bit got undershadowed by The Sixth Sense. And I'm not saying that Sixth Sense was a bad movie. It was a good movie. So that was the problem right there. But I do think, like I said, I love this. I love Stir of Echoes. It was a phenomenal film. I just wish we could have got to see Kevin Bacon in more horror films throughout the 90s and some of those slasher films that we know, those good, phenomenal, those legendary bangers like Nightmare on Elm Street and the Halloween franchise. And maybe even one of the maybe even one of the Child's Play films. He, of course, he didn't have to be like, he couldn't be the protagonist. He could have been like maybe a detective or played some type of role. But I think with the Friday the 13th, of course, we couldn't have seen him in another Friday the 13th because he got picked off as one of the supporting cast in the Friday the 13th film. So that would have kind of been weird for us to see him in another Friday the 13th, seeing how all of us that grew up on that, we know that he got picked off. He was one of the persons that got picked off in the Friday the 13th series. So that is what it is. But I still love Kevin Bacon overall. I think he's a phenomenal actor. Now, another thing I want to share with you guys now, this is it's a very thick case. It is a classic. It's a classic 50 film features collection. Okay, it's a horror classics collection. I want you guys to take a look at this. Okay, make sure you guys can see it. Let me. Okay, hold on 1 second. Right here. So what we have here is, make sure that I got the light going on. So I want to apologize. You guys can't see. Let me back up some. There we go. So it's 50 movies, classic horror classics. Okay. This I had to get my hands on this. When I saw it, I knew I had to get my hands on it. I've been waiting for a while, so it took about good 2 weeks for it to get to me. Now, I want you guys to see how thick it is. So it's a very thick case. And you can see here, it's real thick. So this is actually 50, it's actually a 50 movie collection in here, okay? For those of you guys don't know, hold on, before I go in and let you guys know, okay, because I want to list off some of the films that are here, because there's 50 films, so we can, man, they got a lot of films that I used to watch. So for those of you guys that know, if you guys did watch an episode when I was on Visited by Voices, I was asked the question is, what was the first film that I first got exposed to when I was a child, or what was the first film as far as horror? Was my first film, and I said the first two films I actually saw as far as horror was The Brood and The Curtains, which basically casted Samantha Eggy. But that was the first films that I've seen. But there is a lot of films, a lot of horror films, a lot of classic horror films that I've seen after those films. Like I said, a lot of films, you guys will be surprised, but there is a lot of black and white films that I still, even to this day, that I still watch black and white TV. Yes, I'm sorry to say it, but yes, I do. I watch a lot of black and white films even to this day. I like those old classic black and white films. Even the silent films, okay? You know, like Alfred Hitchcock, he was very known for that. In his early career, Alfred Hitchcock had a lot of silent films. During the time before we had sound and audio got incorporated into films, for those of you guys, I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys may know that silent films were the first films where there wasn't no actual audio. We just had the silent films where we seen the motion in action. But there's a lot of films that I basically like. I love, because I'm just such of a huge horror fan. So yes, I saw a lot of things growing up, and I watched a lot of horror films, different suspense films, thriller, slasher, all that. And you guys will be surprised. There's a lot of classic films that I like. Like I said, certain composers such as Vincent Price, Boris Karloff, Lon Chaney. Okay, there's a lot of people. Okay, now like I said, some of the composers that I really liked and enjoyed growing up, I can remember is like Vincent Price. And I love Vincent Price, a lot of his works. I loved Alfred Hitchcock. I love the whole Twilight saga and everything. There were a lot of other different composers out during that time that were putting out a lot of these classic films that were during the time frame of when you've seen a lot of films throughout the 50s and 40s, and even sometimes when they were black and white films. There was just so phenomenal job, just a hell of a job. But anyways, this is the film right here. This is a collection, a 50 movie horror collection right here. I recommend, if you guys, for those of you guys that do like horror, like a lot of horror, like old school, you want to catch up on a lot of different old school horror films, I recommend that you guys get your hands on this. This is an anniversary collection right here, okay? Horror classics, 50 movies. You'll be surprised with, yes, it is 50 movie collection right here. Horror classics, anniversary edition, okay? Very thick case, okay? Very thick. What I want to say, like I said, I waited 2 weeks on this, but it finally arrived. I just want to list off some of the movies on here. I don't want to list all of them, you guys, okay? But I don't want to spend too much time listing all of them, but there are 50 films on here. Some of the films, The Amazing Mr. X, The Ape. This was black and white in 1940s, okay? We had the Adam Age Vampire, also a black and white film. So a lot of these films that I'm listing on here, this horror classic, a lot of these films on here that's in this 50 movie collection are black and white. The Bat, The Beast of Yucca Flats, Black Dragons, Blood Dust, Bluebeard, The Brain That Wouldn't Die, Carnival Souls, The Corpse Vanishes, Doomed to Die, Dr. Jekyll and Miss Hyde. I know a lot of you guys are aware of the Dr. Jekyll and Miss Hyde. Yes, like I said, a lot of these films that I'm naming to you guys, pretty much this whole collection is pretty much majority of black and white. Okay, as I said, I'm a huge fan of black and white films too, of the early times. I love black and white films. I could watch those all day as well, throughout the 50s and the 40s, throughout the earlier times. I loved them. The silent films as well, just a phenomenal job. Let me name a couple of more to you guys. You have The Nightmare Castle, starring Barbara Steele. You have The Monsters Walks. You have Metropolis. Now, this is a film I want you guys to really, if you have not seen this film, I highly recommend you guys go check this film out. Metropolis. Matter of fact, let me type it in the description for you guys real quick. This was a phenomenal film. Man, you guys, if you have not seen this film, I highly recommend. I'm typing the title in right now, okay, you guys, and then putting the date too. Make sure you guys, if you have not seen this film, let me put it up on the screen. If you have not seen this, the 1927 film Metropolis, I highly recommend you guys watch this film. It is a good film. Like I said, I warn you guys, it's very old. It's old, but it's very good. It's good. This movie actually, it tells you a lot of things that we talk about, especially in Hollywood nowadays. We talk about a lot of, people talk about Illuminati and all this other stuff, etc. throughout Hollywood. This movie, this 1927 film Metropolis, basically exposed you about all the different things like MK Ultra, how they use certain entertainers they use certain entertainers or actors, or they use certain type of frequency to put people under mind control or get the people, mass of people, to do certain things. This film, 1927 film Metropolis, is right on point, but it's a good ass film. It's pretty much about a scientist. Basically, he creates a mimic. So let me, for example, you guys hear about, now we talk about clones. So I know a lot of you guys have heard about clones. So what this film does, it talks of this film bases on about a scientist. He creates a facsimile of an actual lady. So the lady is in captive, but he makes a facsimile of her, and basically the robot, but it looks like a human, but it's a robot. It's dancing on stage with the whole type of like equipment on, look like kind of like a, not Egyptian, but a little bit got that little armor on, like the robotic armor on, and she's doing all that dancing stuff like this. For those of you guys do remember, but when she's dancing and doing her, shaking her hips and doing all this dancing, she's programming all these factory workers and basically putting them under control, basically to whatever ever. So that movie, if you guys haven't seen the 1927 film Metropolis, I highly recommend you guys check that out. Kings of the Zombies, another one on here. The Last Man on Earth, another good film. The Little Shop of Horrors, also bangers. A lot of you guys should know. Maniac, I'm pretty sure you guys should know about Maniac. But yeah, those are like there's much more, but I don't want to go through and list all the films to you guys. But as I said, this is a collection that I actually got. I had to get my hands on it because of the fact that it has a lot of films on here that I've actually seen during my time growing up, especially when I was a young kid. A lot of black and white horror films on here that were classics that I like. A lot of these films are by certain people. Like I said, Vincent Price is a composer of a lot of these films on here. But 50 movies. Yes, 50 movies on this collection right here. Horror classics. Highly recommend. If you don't have it, it's available on Amazon. But that's what I wanted to share for you guys, okay? Just these two things, okay? I have a collection right here, horror classics, a lot of black and white films, and I have Stir of Echoes, which I also think is a phenomenal film. But anyways, as to get back on the point we're talking about, as far as about The Gate. As I said, I think overall The Gate, it was a phenomenal film. It was overall good. As I said, it did have certain points where you could tell that it did not have the best of basically filming and production quality. But overall, I do think that it still was a phenomenal film. Okay, phenomenal film. It stood out alone. It did what it needed to do. I personally think the film did what it needed to do. It didn't give us something that we already seen before. It gave us something a little different. I did think it stood out from all the other films in the genre. And I just think it was on point. For those of you guys that have not seen the movie The Gate, it is available for DVD on Amazon. So if you haven't seen it, after this stream is done, this live stream is over, I'll make sure at some point I'll upload the link to the film in the description on YouTube. So that way, you guys, if you haven't seen The Gate film, or if you want to add it to your collection, it's available on Amazon. As I said, overall, I was highly impressed by the film in general. I was highly impressed with the three main protagonists. I think they did a phenomenal job. The antagonist was very, very good. One thing I thought was a bit, I thought, like I said, was a little bit cheesy. Was as I stated to you guys a little bit earlier, about certain segments in the film where you could tell that they did not have the best quality of film and production being produced. You could tell that they didn't have the same quality maybe as American films, American production films such as Hollywood, but I still think overall it was a phenomenal job. I was just so stuck on this film, and especially the scene. One of my favorite scenes, as I told you guys, I like the scene where I think they did a phenomenal job with the production. Also, matter of fact, before I go any further, I want to make sure that I give credit to the actual composers. Okay, so this film was directed by Tibber Takis. It was produced by John. It was produced by John Kimney and written by Michael Nankin. Okay, so I think with this overall film, I think as far as the production and the writer, the composers, I think it was a good, solid synchronization between them, and I think they did a good job. I actually got to read the screenplay of this film by Michael Nankin, and I think it was a good job. It just was so on point. It was just synchronized. As I said, what I want to talk about with you guys about the Gate film, because it's not pretty much too much I can say more. Like I said, I love this film. I think it was a phenomenal job. As I said, I like the scenario where you've seen the things like it's trying to come out the wall. That was a perfect scene shot. I also like the scene. One of my most favorite scenes and most scenes I can always remember is the scene where all three of them were Al, Glenn, and young Louis Tripp. They were all in the Terry. I'm sorry, I keep saying young Louis Tripp, but Terry. So when Al, Glenn, and Terry, they were in the room. They were in Glenn's room, and then where you seen it was like the older man that came out, I believe, the closet, and he was walking, and then all of a sudden the man broke down into a gang of those baby demons. I just thought that was just so phenomenal. See, I love that scene. That was my most favorable scene. It was just so vicious. See, that's what I like about me as being a huge horror fan. I love that. When I see a horror film, see, anyone can do that. Anyone can make a horror film or produce a horror film or put a horror film out that makes you something about a quick scare or something like that, or just some type of quick scare. Any film could do that. But I think with horror films, it's more than just was it scary or was it a little juicy. It has to give me some type of vibe to it. When I see a horror story, I want to see what was the significance between the protagonist and the antagonist. What is the overall structure of the antagonist? Those things like that are important to me, because when I see a lot of films, especially nowadays, where a lot of these antagonists and a lot of these horror films with antagonists, it's the same with something what I've already seen. It's not really no discrete difference. There's no difference between these horror films. That's where I have a problem with it. I think that nowadays, in the modern age, a lot of horror films, it's almost like these companies are trying to just give a quick something like that's quick and scary. As long as it's a little bit scary, that's fine. The people are going to eat it up. The new generation are going to eat it up. But people like me, when I see a horror film, for me to get excited about it, and especially after seeing it, you have to have an overall good story structure. But the antagonist and the etymology of the antagonist, it has to make sense. It doesn't matter what field of horror it lands in, whether it's environmental nature creature type of horror, or if it's supernatural horror, or if it's maybe like all the different type of horrors that we have. It doesn't matter what type of horror, as long as it got a significant relevance to it, and long as it makes sense, and long as it's something maybe that I haven't seen before, then I would really love it and fall in love with it. And I think that's what happened with Gate. I could honestly tell you guys, honestly, not lying to you guys, being very, very, very pure and very, very honest with myself. I would say, even though I love horror films, and there's a lot of films, and I'm a major horror film, But if I would say one film that actually made me jump, like, oh, would be this movie Gate. This movie Gate was one of the only movies that I could think of. There were maybe a couple of other ones, but this movie right here, The Gate, was one of the only movies, and it's probably maybe only a handful that I can name, but this was one of the movies where it was certain scenes where this movie actually made me jump. Like, even though I was loving it and I'm watching, I'm a major horror fan and I could watch movies in complete dark, but this movie actually made me jump a couple of times throughout the movie. That's how good this movie was, and I like that it gave us that type of horror, that type of scare tactics, that type of connection between the antagonist and the protagonist. That's what I like to see, okay? Because when I could think of, we didn't really see a lot of films like that. Matter of fact, I can't really think of that many films that I saw that had the same significant relevance to this. Another film that I think kind of touched on this, but it wasn't the same, would be The Lost Boys. Now, The Lost Boys, as far as you know, it was kind of like the demonic, it was a vampire thing, but they were doing a little demonic rituals and stuff. That was another movie that was kind of close to this film, but it wasn't the same as far as what we saw from the antagonist. It wasn't the same because Lost Boys wasn't the first film that we saw where we had this whole vampires and everything. So, but I think as far as the demonic possession and the demonic entity, the demonic vibe that we had in The Lost Boys, that's where you certain films where you have that type of evil or satanic stuff in it. But I just think compared to all the other films like we see, a lot of these films that have a lot of exorcisms and demonic possessions, this one, as far as relating to supernatural and specifically into that satanic stuff, I like the overall demon culture that we got from it. I like what it gave us, that backstory. That's pretty much all I have for you guys. Like I said, I recommend you guys watch this film if you have not watched this film. What are the things I want to point out? Yeah, as I told you guys, I was surprised, very surprised that all of the cast members in this, I was surprised that they didn't actually have more like careers continuation after this. I was very surprised about that, but it was okay. I think overall, maybe like I said, this is a problem when we get to talking about these different films. This is the thing when we talk about these different films, and we talk about depending on what genre is from. When we talk about these different films, sorry you guys, a little moving with my camera. It's acting a little weird right now, acting up. Sorry you guys. But anyways, moving on. When we get to talking about these horror films and everything, as I told you guys, I just think personally that depending on where the film originates and depending on where you're getting the film from, this is when we get these 9 times out of 10, we get these whole scenarios where the difference between American films and Canadian films or indie films, this is where we may not see certain films being pushed as much as we see other films being pushed. Like we know a Canadian film, whether it's a horror, action, whatever, but a Canadian horror film or an indie horror film wouldn't probably be pushed so much and wouldn't be pushed to the masses as much as a horror film that came from the Hollywood. This is the difference what we see. So I think that is a big problem, and I think that that's something that needs to be discussed about the difference between Canadian films and indie films, and then when you got the American films that's from Hollywood. This is the difference that I noticed, that we don't get to see some of these actors and actresses from these Canadian films and these independent films, these indie films, compared to how we keep continuously seeing the actors and actresses in the films and the continuation of the films from these American films produced and put out by Hollywood. I think that is a big issue that needs to be discussed and talked about, and I do think something needs to be done about it. Because honestly, that will be for my next upload. Well, it won't be for my next live stream, but for a live stream, because I will do one. I'm not going to schedule it. I'm just going to automatically do the live stream. But I do have a live stream schedule, another live stream schedule for the 15th, which I'm going to be talking about Canadian horror films. And I do think that personally, I could say that I think that Canadian horror films and indie horror films have done they have had a big impact on the horror fan base and the horror community, just as the American Hollywood films have done. Okay, because a lot of, whether you guys know it or not, a lot of these horror films, thriller, suspense, slasher films, especially from the old classic days, a lot of these films were not being put out by Hollywood and put out by Hollywood. These were not American films. A lot of these films were Canadian films, indie films. If you guys didn't know that, so. As I said, I think that enough credit does not go to the Canadian films and the indie films, but I believe honestly, all credits need to go where it needs to go. All dues need to be paid to where they need to be paid to. And I think that personally, as I said, as being a huge horror fan, I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys that are very huge horror fans, also writers, I'm pretty sure you guys know this too, that the Canadian indie films have had a huge impact on the horror community and horror genre. There's a lot of films that were like bangers and that were like did a hell of a job and a phenomenal job. But I think as we talk about that progression and that transgression from childhood stars compared to adult stars, I think that's where we see the issue right there, depending on if the actress is maybe a Canadian actress or a British actress or, certain things like that compared to being an American actor. So I think with these gatekeepers, as I said, with these gatekeepers, I think you guys, we need to do something about that. So all the gatekeepers out there in Hollywood, you need to knock that off because there's a lot of good, like a lot of talent out here. There's a lot of good actors, a lot of good actors out here. There's a lot of good actually writers out here, screenplay writers. There's a lot of good film producers out here. We need something new, okay? Honestly, from what I'm seeing from Hollywood now, we definitely need some more new talent, something new, some creativity and being incorporated because it's not working to me. I'm just not happy with what I'm seeing. There's a lot of horror films that's coming out, and I can't think of the last time when I was just really excited to see a horror film or a slasher film. I'm just not excited, okay? So, as I said, I do think that needs to be a credit that needs to be taken account for. So, and I do think credit needs to go to where it needs to go. These are Canadian films and these Canadian composers, these Canadian producers, these Canadian writers, these indie writers, these indie composers. I do think that they need to be given the credit they need to be given. And I wouldn't be surprised and I wouldn't be mad. I would be happy if during like maybe say like the Oscars, that they would actually incorporate that, like start giving some of these awards to not just all majority of these American composers and these American actors and actresses, give it down and break it down to some of these Canadian actors and actors and these Canadian producers, film composers, these screenplay writers. You got to start balancing it out, okay? But that's all I have for you guys. I don't want to keep you guys too much longer, okay? I just wanted to be true to it. I want to stay committed, so I wanted to make sure I got the live stream done because I had to reschedule. It was originally scheduled for the 1st, but I had to bump it up to today, the 3rd, because I really was at the last minute. I was so tied up, so I knew I wasn't going to be able to get the live stream done. But I don't have any more for you guys. I want to appreciate for those of you guys that are tuned into the show and for commenting onto the show. If you do, for those of you guys that come into the show after, it will be available on YouTube, so you guys will be able to go back and watch it. But as I said, The Gate, overall, this movie, The Gate, I think is a phenomenal film. And I do think that this film should be idolized more than it is idolized. And as I said, I could even arguably put this film in my top. Sorry, you guys, a little bit, but it got some sunlight connection going. So you're starting to see the little blend of my face. But we're going to keep going. Get ready to wrap this up. But as I was saying, The Gate is a phenomenal film. If I had to choose, on my top 10 list, it would definitely be in my top 10 list of horror films of all time. But it would actually be in, when I get down to the top 5, it would be in that top 5. If I had to say, I probably would say this would be between my top 3. So it would be out of the top 3, when I get a top 10 list, my top 3, when I get on that top 10 list, the final 3, this film, The Gate, would be actually in there. There's not really 2 films that I would say was just overall was phenomenal. I love the It movie. Okay, I know there's a lot of mixed views about the It movie. Okay, a lot of people say that they like the new version of the It movie compared to the old version of the It movie. Well, I think that the new It movie, it was good. As I said, explained to you guys earlier about that. When you want that quick jump scare, you want a little quick something that's like scary, but it didn't have like really no solid uniqueness to it. That's the problem I had with the new It movie, because I felt that it was in correlation. It was in a contradiction with the original film. That's the problem I had with the new It film. It's just like, okay, wait a minute, this is a contradiction to the new It film. But yes, I said a lot of people like the It film. They prefer it better than the old It film. Personally, me, I like the It film better than the new It film because of the fact that it's not so much about the quality of now. You see, we have a lot of right now compared to back then, compared to now, we have the quality, the video quality, and et cetera, is totally different. But the It film, it had a huge impact, I think. And it was one of those, like we said, those childhood horror films. I still think that childhood horror films are some of the best horror films that have ever been made, childhood horror films. And I think the impact of the It film itself, it was about these group of teenagers, and they have to deal with this whole thing where this antagonist, like this a clown that's messing with them, and then the parents not believing them, but come to find out the parents knowing that something is happening because the parents are ignoring and not addressing the issues that's happening in this town when their kids are disappearing. But I just think that the old film, it was good to me. I liked it overall personally. So I know a lot of people won't feel that they personally didn't like the original one, but I liked the original. To me personally, I loved it. It was probably my top one. It'd probably go at top one on my list. As I said, if I want to say top three, my top three on my top 10 list, Halloween, and The Gate, right there. So I'll put The Gate at number 3. I will put Halloween at number 2, and I will put It at number 1. But that's all I have for you guys. As I said, it's a phenomenal film. Phenomenal film. If you haven't watched this film, I recommend you watch it. If you have watched it, I recommend you go watch it again, because you might see something where you missed the first time when you watched it. Maybe when you were a kid or something, you sit back and look like, wow. You could appreciate, like, see, that's the thing about some films where you go back and watch them. You can sit back and watch and like, okay, wow, I can appreciate now even more of this film and how crafty this film was compared to when I'm watching now compared to back then. Back then, I loved it and I enjoyed it, but now so many years went by and I'm going back watching some of these old movies that I used to watch growing up. I can start appreciating even more things that I really didn't like maybe notice. You see some things that you didn't notice, and then you see some things you more appreciate more about the film than when you did when you were younger. That's what I feel about this film right here, The Gate. It's a phenomenal film overall. Phenomenal overall. As I said, the three actors on the three main cast in this, I was surprised that they all did not have follow-up careers, very good, successful careers after The Gate, because the Gate was basically just a banger, a huge foundation. But we know pretty much only Stephen Dorff had a decent, pretty career. But Christa, Denton, don't know what happened. Okay, Tripp playing Terry, don't know what happened. He's been in a couple things, but it's not been nothing that's commonly known where everybody know of it. The only thing, as I said, we know of is the blood sport. And other than that, that's all I have for you guys. I want to thank you guys for tuning in to the show. As you guys, so you guys will know that I am doing a reconstruction, a little bit of construction, trying to make my live streams a little bit better. So you'll start seeing maybe some possible intros to my live streams now. Also, my schedule up, they give you guys a teaser. Not the next, because I'm actually going to be doing another live stream before the 15th, but it won't be scheduled. But my next actual scheduled live stream will be when I'll be discussing about Canadian films. And I'm actually going to, so you guys know, I will be posting the link. I will be posting the link ahead of time, maybe a day ahead of time, or maybe a few hours ahead of time on my social media platforms, on Twitter, etc. So that way, for anyone that wants to jump in on that live stream on the 15th, you guys are more than welcome, because I actually would like to see a lot of people actually engaged on that live stream that I have scheduled for the 15th when we're talking about Canadian horror films. I would like to also see a lot of different opinions and points of views from other people as far as their opinions about the Canadian horror films. And also for everyone that's a part of the community, I will actually start contacting some of them as well on Twitter to see if they would like to join that live stream schedule for the 15th as well. So that way you guys won't just see me, myself, talking about Canadian horror films, but I would like to see overall the whole stream. I would like to see a group of us on a podium actually having a huge discussion and a critical discussion about Canadian horror films and the impact that they actually have made on the horror fan base and the horror community. Other than that, as well, you guys, my podcast is also under construction. I actually had my podcast, I had it started way before I even started doing the YouTube, a little bit before it, but I took a break from it. So my podcast is under construction. So it's going to be, once I have it fully finished, and I have a certain amount of episodes I want up, I'm going to start actually dropping the links to my podcast as well, also on my YouTube description videos. But other than that, I want to thank you guys once again for tuning in the show. I always give you guys much love and respect, because if it wasn't for you guys, it would be no me. So thank you guys, much love and much appreciation. And don't forget, as well, as I said, be looking out for the next scheduled stream. The next scheduled stream, which will be on July 15th, which I believe is on a Thursday. It's either Thursday or Saturday, but I think it's on Thursday. So also, so you guys know, I'm going to try to keep a continuous schedule. So all my live streams, whether I schedule or non-schedule, it's going to be on Thursdays and Saturdays. Because what I notice is in our community, we all do live streams. But I want to try to make it to where all of us are not kind of coming in contradiction with each other. So where you have three of us that are live streaming on the same day or maybe the same times. So that's why I want to set certain days to where I know Thursdays and Saturdays. So that way I don't want it to be too many people live streaming on the same day. So I have done my research, and I see that some of the other people in my community, I noticed that they tend to upload on certain particular days. So I will make actually Thursdays and Saturdays my particular days that I will live stream, whether it's scheduled or not. But as I said, this will be a community open line for the next scheduled live stream, which will be on July 15th when we're talking about Canadian horror films. All of you guys are more than welcome to jump in on the podium and then give your thoughts and opinions about any Canadian horror films you may have liked, or the impact you think that Canadian horror films have made on the entire community and the fan base. So as all, I want to close up saying thank you to all you guys. Make sure you guys support the channel, subscribe to the channel if you have not. Subscribe to Let's Talk for a Minute. Okay. Also, I want to make sure you guys go subscribe. Make sure you go subscribe to Loran on Visited by Voices. Make sure you subscribe to Loran on Visited by Voices. Make sure you subscribe. Go subscribe and check out, if you're not already, go subscribe and go check out the Region Free. Make sure you go check out Slaughterport. Also, make sure you go check out Jaythestingray. Okay, all these channels I just listed to you guys. They do a phenomenal job, and they have a lot of content up. So make sure you go check them out. Like I said, once again, and I will make sure that I put a link to all of their channels on their platforms and on the link in the description on once the video is fully uploaded on YouTube. So once again, make sure you go check out Visited by Voices, go check out Region Free, go check out Slaughterport, and also go check out Jaythestingray. Okay, they all, I love the work they do. It's just, this community is so big. There's many more of us. Okay, there's many more of us, but I don't want to sit here and naming all of them because I don't want you guys to get fabricated. But that's all I have for you guys. And like I said, I want to thank you guys for tuning in. As once again to the show, you guys have been just doing a lot of love, showing a lot of love and a lot of support. You guys have really been encouraging me more. You guys have been encouraging me more to actually keep planting these seeds for you guys. Okay, and you will start seeing me, as I said, you're starting to see me recently. You're starting to see me on other people's podcasts. Thanks, Loran. Thanks. You appreciate that. Loran says, great show. Appreciate that. But you guys will start seeing me on other shows. You will start seeing me sometimes guest premiering on Visited by Voices. You also guys will probably see me premiere on Region Free maybe sometimes, or even on Jaythestingray, or even Slaughterport, or even on there's so many. Okay, you guys. So I just don't want to name so many, but yeah. As I said again, just be looking out for it, okay? But you guys, you won't see me all the time premiering all the people because I do have a busy schedule. So sometimes I wind up jumping into a live stream that's going on at the last minute, and instead of me jumping in, I'll just sit back and watch it. But other than that, like I said, much love, much appreciation to y'all, you guys. I hope you guys have a peace and blessed day. So until next time, thanks to all you guys for tuning in. Peace.